Hannah Sutton's knees hit frozen ground. 3 days walking, no food since yesterday morning. Her daughter Molly swayed beside her, too exhausted to cry. The ranch gate stood 10 feet away, the last gate before the mountains. Hannah had nothing left. No money, no pride, no choice. She forced herself upright, gripped Molly's hand, and walked toward the man watching from the other side. She would offer work for shelter. She would beg if she had to. What she didn't expect was the word that would change everything. Guest. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe and follow this story to the end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The iron latch clicked under Caleb Thornton's calloused hand. Another day done. Another evening alone. February wind cut across his Wyoming ranch sharp enough to make his eyes water. Or maybe that was something else. 4 years since Martha died, and some evenings still felt like the first. Caleb secured the gate and turned toward the main house. Lamplight glowed from the windows, but no one waited inside. His ranch hand Silas had ridden to town an hour ago. Something about a card game and whiskey. Caleb preferred the quiet, or so he told himself. Movement caught his eye. 2 figures on the road. A woman and a child walking slow. Too slow. The kind of pace that meant they'd been walking too long on too little food. Caleb watched them approach. The woman carried a bundle tied with rope. Everything she owned he reckoned wrapped in faded canvas. The child clung to her skirts, stumbling every few steps. They stopped 10 feet from his gate. The woman didn't reach for the latch. Didn't call out presumptuous greetings. Just stood there in the dying light, dust and exhaustion carved into every line of her face. The child, a girl maybe 8 years old, leaned against her mother's hip. She was trembling, not from cold alone, from hunger, from fear, from whatever hell they'd walked through to reach this place. Caleb studied them across the barrier of wood and iron. The woman straightened her spine, lifted her chin. Whatever remained of her dignity, she gathered it like armor and met his eyes without flinching. "Sir?" Her voice was steady, despite everything screaming otherwise. "My name is Hannah Sutton. This is my daughter Molly." Caleb waited. Wind moved between them, cold and indifferent. "I'm asking for work in exchange for shelter." Hannah continued. "I can cook, clean, mend. I'm strong enough for most tasks. We won't be trouble. Just need a place until spring." Her hand rested on the gatepost. His hand remained on the latch. The barrier between them felt suddenly heavy wood and iron, transformed into a question only he could answer. Molly's teeth chattered. Hannah's bundle sagged against her hip. Behind Caleb, lamplight spilled golden across snow, promising warmth his empty house couldn't properly contain. "We've been walking 3 days. Hannah's voice wavered for the first time. "You're the last ranch before the mountains. If you can't help, I understand. We'll move on come morning." But they had nowhere left to go. Caleb saw that truth written in the shadows beneath her eyes. In the way Molly swayed on her feet. In the desperate mathematics of a mother measuring miles against a child's endurance. His thumb moved against the latch. The metal was cold. The decision felt heavier than iron. What kind of man would he choose to be? Caleb opened the gate. The hinges creaked in the settling darkness. Hannah's eyes widened. Surprise flickered across her exhausted face. She stepped forward, already forming words of gratitude, already accepting the bargain she'd proposed. But Caleb raised his hand. "You're not my worker." He said it quiet, final. "You're my guest." Hannah froze. "Sir, I don't understand." "Name's Caleb Thornton. This is my land." He pushed the gate wider. "You'll stay in the foreman's cabin. It's clean. Got a good stove. I'll bring food directly." "Mr. Thornton, I can't accept charity." Hannah's spine straightened further, pride surfacing through exhaustion like bone through skin. "I offered fair exchange. Let me earn our keep." "You're offering what you think you must," Caleb replied. I'm offering what I can give. That's the end of it. Molly watched this adult negotiation with wide, uncomprehending eyes. She shivered again, and the movement decided something in Caleb's chest. 4 years of letting his wealth accumulate without purpose. His success meaning nothing beyond numbers in a ledger and fences that kept nothing in and nobody out. Please, Hannah tried again. I won't be beholden. You'll be my guest. Caleb interrupted not unkindly. That's different than being beholden. Guest stays as long as needed, leaves when ready, no debts tallied between friends. We're not friends. We're strangers. Then we'll start there and see where it leads. He gestured toward the cluster of buildings behind him. The foreman's cabin sat 50 yards from the main house, close enough for safety, far enough for privacy. Hannah looked from him to the cabin to her daughter. Molly's exhaustion won the argument. All right, Hannah whispered. But Mr. Thornton... Caleb. The word felt strange on her tongue. We'll stay tonight. Move on tomorrow. They both knew tomorrow would bring the same exhaustion, the same desperation, the same empty road with nowhere left to walk. Caleb nodded anyway, letting her keep that small dignity of pretending. The cabin interior was simple but sound. 1 room with a bed, a table, 2 chairs. The stove radiated heat into corners that had been cold too long. Hannah stood just inside the doorway, her bundle still clutched against her hip. Molly had already crawled onto the bed, too tired to remove her shoes. I'll bring stew, Caleb said from the threshold. And bread if you're hungry. We're hungry. Molly whispered, speaking for the first time. Hannah closed her eyes briefly. Caleb pretended not to notice the shame that flickered across her features. He left them alone. The walk back to his house felt different than it had for 4 years. Snow began falling as he ladled stew into a pot. Soft flakes drifted past the window, covering tracks, erasing evidence of their arrival. Fresh snow meant fresh starts, or so his mother used to say back when Caleb still believed the world operated on such simple poetry. He carried food to the cabin, left it on the porch, knocked once and walked away. Behind him, the door opened. What kind of man are you? Hannah called softly. Caleb turned back, snow catching in his hat brim. Just a man with more than he needs, I reckon. He returned to his house alone. But for the first time in 4 years, the lamplight in another building made his property feel less like a grave and more like land with purpose. Hannah woke to warmth. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind. Then memory returned. The walk, the gate, the strange rancher who offered sanctuary without price. She lay still, letting heat from the stove seep into bones that had been cold for weeks. Molly slept beside her, face peaceful for the first time since they'd left the ruins of the homestead. Since before that, really. Since her father had worked himself into his grave trying to make bad land yield enough to feed them. Hannah closed her eyes against tears. William had been a good man who made one terrible choice. He'd trusted a land agent's promises, bought property that couldn't grow crops, spent 3 years breaking himself against stubborn earth. When fever took him last autumn, Hannah felt grief and relief in equal measure. The grief was honest. The relief brought shame. The homestead went to creditors. Hannah packed what she could carry and started walking toward her sister in Oregon Territory. But money ran out 200 miles short. Then hope ran out. Then everything ran out except the will to keep Molly alive. Caleb Thornton's gate had appeared in the dusk like an answer to prayers Hannah had stopped believing anyone heard. She rose quietly, dressed, ventured toward the main house. Dawn painted the valley in shades of gray and gold. Smoke rose from Caleb's chimney. The man kept early hours. Hannah knocked on his door, determined to at least earn breakfast. He answered, already dressed, coffee cup in hand, looking unsurprised to find her on his porch. Thought you might sleep longer. I'm accustomed to early rising. Let me cook breakfast. Caleb studied her over the rim of his cup, Then he stepped aside, allowing her entry. His kitchen was clean but obviously maintained by someone who cooked from duty rather than pleasure. Hannah found flour, eggs, bacon. She worked efficiently, aware of him watching from the doorway. "Your wife taught you to keep a tidy house." She observed, breaking eggs into a bowl. "Martha did most of the keeping. I just tried not to mess it up too badly after she passed." "I'm sorry for your loss. 4 years gone now. Still feels like yesterday sometimes. Other times feels like another life entirely." Hannah mixed batter for biscuits. "My husband died 6 months ago. Worked himself to death on a homestead that never should have been sold to anyone." "That's hard." It was. Hannah shaped dough with practiced hands. "But I've got Molly. Long as she's alive, I've got reason to keep moving." Caleb poured her coffee without asking. Set the cup beside her workspace like they'd shared mornings 100 times before. "You're welcome to stay longer than one night," he said quietly. "Spring's still weeks off. Road to Oregon will be muddy and hard. People will talk. Widow and child living on a bachelor's ranch. People talk regardless. I stopped listening to most of it years ago." Hannah slid biscuits into the oven, turned to face him. He looked lonely standing there in his tidy kitchen. Successful and respected and utterly alone. She recognized the expression because she wore it herself most mornings. "Why are you helping us?" "Because I can. Because this house is too big for one man's grief. Because Martha would have done the same without hesitation, and I've spent 4 years forgetting what she taught me about being human." Molly's laughter suddenly rang from outside. Hannah moved to the window. Her daughter was exploring the yard, chasing chickens with pure childish delight. Caleb stood beside Hannah watching. "When's the last time she laughed like that?" "I don't remember." "Then stay until spring. Help me plan the garden if you want work." "But you're staying as a guest, Hannah. That's not negotiable." She wanted to argue. Wanted to maintain the respectability of fair exchange. But Molly's laughter continued bright as morning light, and Hannah couldn't bring herself to take that away. "All right," she whispered, "until spring." They stood together at the window. Two broken people watching a child remember joy, while the smell of biscuits filled the kitchen, and the first true thaw began dripping from the eaves outside. Silas Cooper returned from town mid-morning, nursing a hangover and a lighter pocket. He found Caleb in the barn checking on the horses. Nothing unusual there. What caught Silas's attention was the woman hanging laundry behind the foreman's cabin and the child feeding chickens like she'd lived here her whole life. "Boss?" Silas approached carefully. "Something you want to tell me?" Caleb didn't look up from the horse he was brushing. "Hannah Sutton and her daughter Molly. They're staying in the cabin until spring." "Staying?" "As my guests." Silas chewed on that for a moment. He'd worked for Caleb since the beginning, knew him better than most. The man had been a ghost since Martha died, present in body, absent in everything else. Town's gonna talk. Town always talks. This'll be different. Widow moving in with a bachelor rancher, Prudence Whitmore, will have a sermon written by sundown. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he kept brushing. Let her write. Silas studied his employer. Something had shifted in Caleb's face, something that looked almost like life returning to dead eyes. "She pretty?" Silas asked. "That's not what this is about." "Didn't say it was. Just asked if she's pretty." Caleb finally looked up. "She's exhausted and hungry and walked 3 days with a child to reach my gate. That's what matters." Silas nodded slowly. "All right, boss. I'll keep my mouth shut in town." "Appreciate it." "But Silas?" Caleb's voice stopped him as he turned to leave. "Yeah. Make sure the cabin has enough firewood and check if the girl needs warmer clothes. There's things of Martha's in the attic. Small, but they might fit." Silas hid his surprise. Caleb hadn't touched Martha's belongings in 4 years. Hadn't allowed anyone else to touch them either. "I'll see to it." He walked away, shaking his head. Whatever that widow had done to crack Caleb Thornton's frozen heart, Silas hoped she kept doing it. The first week passed quietly. Hannah cooked without being asked. Caleb ate without commenting. Molly bloomed like spring flowers, color returning to her cheeks, her laughter becoming common as birdsong. Caleb carved her a small horse from scrap wood. She named it Thunder and carried it everywhere, chattering about the ranch and the chickens and Mr. Caleb, who was so tall and so kind. Hannah watched her daughter transform and felt something dangerous growing in her chest, something that felt like hope. She tried to crush it. Hope had failed her before. Hope had followed William to Nebraska. Hope had planted crops in soil that couldn't grow. Hope had stood beside a grave and whispered promises that turned to ash. But Molly kept laughing. Caleb kept offering quiet kindness. And the cabin stayed warm against the February cold. On the 7th night, Hannah found Caleb on the porch of the main house, staring at nothing. "May I join you?" He gestured to the empty chair beside him. She sat. Stars emerged overhead, brilliant against the black Wyoming sky. The silence between them felt comfortable rather than awkward. "Tell me about Martha," Hannah said finally. Caleb was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "We married young, 17 and 18. Everyone said we were fools." His voice was rough, unused to sharing. "But we built this place together. Every fence post, every board of that barn. She wanted children. God didn't see fit to give us any. I'm sorry. She made peace with it better than I did. Said we'd be enough for each other." He paused. She was right. We were. "What happened?" "Fever took her quick. 3 days from healthy to gone. I've spent 4 years trying to figure out how to live in a world without her in it." Hannah understood that particular devastation. The way loss could hollow you out and leave you walking through days that felt like nothing more than endurance. "William worked himself to death," she heard herself saying. "Refused to admit defeat even when the land made it obvious. I loved him, but I was angry too. Angry he wouldn't quit, wouldn't ask for help, wouldn't see what his pride was costing Molly." That's a hard thing to carry. It is. I've been walking with that anger beside the grief, not sure which weighs more. They sat in shared silence, two broken people beginning to understand they might heal better together than apart. "Thank you," Hannah whispered finally, "for letting us stay. Thank you for staying." She looked at him in the starlight. His face was weathered, marked by years of sun and wind and sorrow. But his eyes were kind, patient, the eyes of a man who had learned to wait for good things because he'd lost too much to rush. "Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Hannah." She walked back to the cabin, feeling his gaze follow her across the snow. Something was changing between them. Something neither dared name yet. Inside, Molly slept peacefully. Thunder, the wooden horse, clutched in her small hands. Hannah lay down beside her daughter and for the first time in months, didn't dread tomorrow. Chia. The second week brought visitors. Caleb needed supplies from town. Hannah needed fabric for Molly's growing body. They couldn't avoid the world forever. They rode in the wagon together, Molly nestled between them. The early March day carried promise of warmth, though snow still crowned the distant peaks. Caleb drove with easy competence. Hannah watched the road, anxiety building in her chest. The town materialized around a bend. 24 buildings clustered where the valley widened. Church steeple reached toward heaven. Saloon promised earthier pleasures. The general store sat between them, neutral territory for commerce and gossip. Caleb helped Hannah down from the wagon. Molly took her mother's hand. They walked together toward the store. Conversation stopped. Hannah felt every eye turn, felt the weight of judgment settle like dust on her shoulders. Women near the fabric table fell silent. Men by the pot-bellied stove exchanged knowing glances. Prudence Whitmore stood near the counter. Her expression could have frozen whiskey in July. "Caleb Thornton." Prudence's voice carried calculated sweetness. "How fortunate. The bachelor rancher finds time to shop, and with such company." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Mrs. Whitmore. Hannah stepped forward, refusing to cower. I don't believe we've met. I'm Hannah Sutton. I know who you are. Prudence's eyes swept over Hannah's mended dress, her worn shoes, her daughter clutching a homemade wooden horse. The whole town knows. A widow who moved onto a bachelor's ranch within days of arriving. How convenient. There's nothing convenient about walking 3 days with a child in winter, ma'am. And yet you found such comfortable accommodations at the end of your journey. Hannah felt heat rise to her cheeks. Behind her, Molly pressed closer, sensing the hostility, even if she didn't understand it. Caleb stepped between them. Mrs. Whitmore. His voice was quiet but carried steel. Mrs. Sutton is my guest. I'd appreciate you treating her with the respect that title deserves. Guest. Prudence repeated the word like it tasted sour. Is that what we're calling it? It's what I'm calling it. And it's all anyone needs to know. The storekeeper, a nervous man named Howard Beck, cleared his throat. Caleb folks are just concerned. It's unusual is all. Let them be concerned. I'll be buying my supplies now. Caleb moved through the store, gathering what he needed, his silence more pronounced than any response. He paid for Hannah's fabric and Molly's peppermint stick as casually as buying his own tobacco. The gesture wasn't lost on anyone watching. They left the store to whispers following like winter wind. Molly sucked her peppermint, oblivious. Hannah climbed into the wagon with burning cheeks. The ride home stretched long and silent. Finally, Hannah spoke. I should leave, before I cause more damage to your reputation. Caleb didn't look at her. My reputation was built by my own hands. It'll take more than wagging tongues to tear it down. Prudence Whitmore won't stop. Women like her never do. Prudence Whitmore buried a husband who died in another woman's bed. She spent 8 years pretending otherwise. Her judgment of other people's arrangements doesn't concern me. Hannah stared at him. I didn't know. Not many do. I only know because Doc Reed was there when it happened. Caleb finally met her eyes. People who live in glass houses, Hannah. They throw stones because they're afraid someone will look through their own windows. Molly had fallen asleep against Hannah's shoulder, the peppermint stick still clutched in her sticky fingers. You're sure you want us to stay? It will get worse before it gets better. I'm sure. Why? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because my house has been quiet for 4 years. Because Molly's laugh sounds like something I forgot existed. Because you looked at me across that gate like you expected nothing, and I wanted to give you everything. Hannah's breath caught. That's not, we can't. I'm not asking for anything. Caleb interrupted gently. Just telling you why you're welcome to stay. Whatever this becomes, whatever it doesn't become, you and Molly have a place here. That's all I'm saying. The ranch appeared ahead, gates standing open in the afternoon light. Hannah looked at the man beside her, at his weathered hands on the reins, at the gray streaking his temples, at the kindness in his eyes that asked nothing in return. She had promised herself she would never depend on anyone again, never trust anyone with her daughter's safety, never let herself hope. But Caleb Thornton wasn't asking her to depend. He was offering her ground to stand on while she found her own feet. That was different. That was something she might be able to accept. We'll stay, she said quietly. Until spring. And we'll see what spring brings. Caleb nodded. They drove through the open gate together, and Hannah tried not to notice that it felt like coming home. That night in the cabin, Molly asked the question Hannah had been avoiding. Mama, are we going to live here forever? Hannah tucked the blanket around her daughter's small body. I don't know, sweetheart. We're staying until spring. I like it here. I like Mr. Caleb. He's nice. He is nice. He's lonely, though, Molly said with the simple wisdom of children. Like you were lonely after Papa died. Maybe you can be lonely together, and then not lonely anymore. Hannah's throat tightened. It's not that simple, Molly. Why not? Because people talk. Because reputation matters. Because I'm scared to trust anyone again. But she didn't say any of that. Go to sleep, sweetheart. We'll talk tomorrow. Molly closed her eyes. Thunder, the wooden horse, tucked under her chin. Hannah sat in the dark, listening to her daughter breathe, thinking about Gates and kindness and the terrifying possibility that sometimes good things happen to people who had stopped expecting them. Outside, snow began falling again. Fresh snow meant fresh starts. Hannah wasn't sure she believed that anymore. But sitting in this warm cabin on this quiet ranch with a man who asked nothing and offered everything, she was willing to try. 2 weeks changed everything. Hannah stopped talking about leaving. Caleb stopped expecting her to. They fell into rhythm like two people who'd been waiting their whole lives to find the same beat. Mornings, Hannah cooked breakfast in Caleb's kitchen. Not because he asked, because she wanted to. Because standing at his stove listening to Molly's laughter outside, feeling the warmth of a house that wasn't hers, but somehow felt like home, it filled something that had been empty too long. Caleb ate without complaint, complimented her biscuits, left coffee on the counter for her before she woke. Small kindnesses, quiet gestures, the language of people afraid to speak what they felt. Molly noticed everything. Caleb looks at you different now, Mama. Hannah nearly dropped the plate she was washing. What do you mean? Like Papa used to look at you, before he got sick and tired all the time. Hannah's hands stilled in the soapy water. Her daughter saw too much. Always had. Mr. Caleb is just being kind, sweetheart. No. Molly shook her head with the certainty of childhood. It's different. He smiles when you come in the room. He didn't smile before we came. Silas told me. You've been talking to Silas. He teaches me about horses. He says Mr. Caleb was like a ghost before. Now he's like a person again. Molly picked up Thunder, her wooden horse. I think we woke him up, Mama, like in the fairy stories. We woke him up from being asleep. Hannah didn't know what to say. She was still searching for words when Caleb appeared in the doorway. Molly, want to help me feed the horses? The girl was out of her chair before Hannah could respond, racing toward Caleb with Thunder clutched in her fist. Can I name the brown one, please? She doesn't have a name yet, and I thought of the perfect one. What name? Maple, because she's brown like maple syrup, and sweet like it too. Caleb's face softened in a way Hannah had never seen with anyone else. Maple it is. Molly grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the barn, chattering about horses and names and whether Thunder would like having a real horse friend. Hannah watched them go. Her daughter's small hand in his large one. The easy way Molly trusted him. The patience in Caleb's stride as he shortened his steps to match hers. William had never walked that slow for Molly. Always rushing. Always focused on the next field, to plow the next fence, to mend the next impossible task, on the endless list of keeping a failing homestead alive. Caleb had nowhere to be except wherever Molly wanted to take him. Hannah pressed her hand against her chest, trying to slow her heartbeat. This was dangerous. This feeling. This hope. Hope had destroyed her once. She wasn't sure she could survive it destroying her again. But watching Caleb lift Molly onto the fence rail so she could pet Maple's nose, hearing her daughter's delighted squeal carry across the morning air, Hannah couldn't make herself walk away. Not yet. Not when everything inside her was finally starting to thaw. The trouble started 3 days later. Silas came back from town with a face like thunder and a message that made Caleb's jaw turn to stone. Henderson canceled the cattle contract. Caleb stopped mending the harness in his hands. What? Said his wife heard things. Said he can't do business with a man who... Silas spat tobacco juice into the dirt. You know what she said. Same poison Prudence Whitmore's been spreading since the widow arrived. Hannah was in the garden too far to hear. Molly was helping her plant early seeds, their laughter floating across the yard. Caleb watched them for a long moment. Henderson's contract was worth 200 head. I know, boss. That's a quarter of my spring sales. I know. Caleb's hands tightened on the leather harness. 200 head. Money he'd counted on. Money that would have meant new fencing, better breeding stock security for another year. Gone. Because he'd opened his gate to a woman who needed help. Anyone else pulling out? Silas hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Who? Morrison's thinking about it. Says his wife goes to Prudence's quilting circle. Says things are getting complicated. Morrison was another 100 head. Between him and Henderson, Caleb stood to lose nearly half his spring income. And you're telling me this why? Because you need to know what you're up against. Silas met his eyes. And because I want to know if you're planning to do something about it. Like what, send Hannah away. Some men would. I'm not some men. I know. Silas nodded slowly. That's why I've stayed all these years. You're the only boss I've had who actually means what he says. Caleb looked toward the garden again. Hannah was showing Molly how to space the seeds, her hands gentle in the dark soil. Molly was copying every movement with fierce concentration. She doesn't know yet, Caleb said quietly. About the contracts. You gonna tell her? No. She'll find out eventually. Then she'll find out. But not from me. And not because I made her feel like she caused it. Silas studied him for a long moment. You care about her? It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't need to. But Hannah wasn't a fool. She noticed things. The way Caleb's shoulders tightened when Silas came back from town. The worried glances the two men exchanged when they thought she wasn't looking. The letters Caleb burned without reading, his face hard as Wyoming granite. She waited 3 days before confronting him. What aren't you telling me? Caleb looked up from his ledger. Hannah stood in the doorway of his study, arms crossed, that stubborn chin lifted the same way it had been the night she arrived at his gate. Nothing that concerns you. Everything that happens on this ranch concerns me now. You made me your guest. That means I get to worry about you the same way you worry about me. Hannah. Silas has been avoiding my eyes for 3 days. You burned 4 letters without reading them. And last night you sat on the porch until midnight staring at nothing. She stepped into the room. Tell me. Caleb set down his pen. Henderson canceled his cattle contract. Morrison might be next. Hannah's face went pale. Because of me. Because of small-minded people who'd rather gossip than mind their own business. How much money? It doesn't matter. How much? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Enough to hurt, not enough to ruin me. Hannah sank into the chair across from his desk. Her hands were shaking. I'll leave. Tonight. Before it gets worse. No. Caleb, you're losing business because of me. Your reputation, your livelihood, are mine to risk. He leaned forward, his voice fierce. I've got more money than I need and less happiness than I can bear. If losing a few contracts is the price of having you and Molly here, I'll pay it gladly. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would you sacrifice so much for strangers? You're not strangers anymore. Caleb rose from his desk, moved around to kneel beside her chair. You're the first people who've made this house feel like something other than a tomb. Molly's laughter, your smile, the way you look at me like I'm worth something beyond my land and my cattle. He took her hands. His were rough with work. Hers were trembling. I was dead before you came, Hannah. Walking around breathing, eating, sleeping, but dead inside. You woke me up. I'm not going to apologize for wanting to stay awake. A tear slipped down Hannah's cheek. I'm scared. Of what? Of hoping, of trusting, of letting myself believe this is real and then losing it all again. Caleb squeezed her hands. I can't promise you nothing bad will ever happen, but I can promise I won't send you away. Whatever comes, we face it together. That's what this is now. What is this? I don't know yet. He smiled, and the smile transformed his weathered face into something almost young. "But I'd like to find out, if you're willing." Hannah looked at him for a long moment. This man who asked nothing and gave everything. This man who'd opened his gate when he could have kept it closed. This man who was risking his livelihood for her and asking nothing in return. "I'm willing," she whispered. "God help me, I'm willing." Caleb raised her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles once gentle as morning light. Then he stood, stepped back, and the moment was over. But something had changed between them. Something that couldn't be unchanged. The town's assault came faster than either expected. 3 days after Hannah and Caleb's conversation, the minister arrived. Reverend Thomas Grayson was a thin man with kind eyes and a weak spine. He meant well. Everyone said so. But meaning well and doing right weren't always the same thing, and Grayson had a habit of bending toward whoever pushed hardest. Right now, Prudence Whitmore was pushing very hard indeed. "Caleb." Grayson climbed down from his buggy hat in hands. "I was hoping we might talk." "Talk then." The minister glanced toward the garden where Hannah and Molly were working. His discomfort was obvious. "Perhaps somewhere private. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Mrs. Sutton." Grayson's face flushed. "The congregation is concerned." "About what?" "About the arrangement here. The appearance of impropriety. Some feel that Mrs. Sutton and her daughter might be more appropriately housed in town. The Whitmore home has spare rooms. Prudence Whitmore offered to house them. She feels it would be the Christian thing to do." Caleb laughed. The sound was hard and cold. "The Christian thing, is that what we're calling it?" "Caleb, please, I'm trying to find a solution that satisfies everyone." "Everyone except Hannah and Molly, you mean? They're not invited to be satisfied." Hannah had stopped working. She walked toward them, wiping dirt from her hands, her face carefully neutral. "Reverend Grayson?" "Mrs. Sutton." He couldn't meet her eyes. "I was just explaining to Caleb that some members of the congregation have concerns. About my living arrangements. Yes, I heard?" "It's not personal, you understand. It's about appearances. About setting a proper example for the community." "A proper example?" Hannah's voice was dangerously quiet. "Tell me, Reverend, when my daughter and I were starving on that road, when we'd walked 3 days in the cold with nothing but each other, did anyone from your congregation come looking for us? Did Prudence Whitmore offer her spare rooms then?" Grayson said nothing. "Caleb Thornton opened his gate when no one else would. He fed us, sheltered us, asked nothing in return. And now your congregation wants to punish him for it. It's not punishment, Mrs. Sutton, it's propriety." "Propriety." Hannah stepped closer, and the minister actually took a step back. "I've learned something about propriety these past months, Reverend. It's what people hide behind when they don't want to do the right thing. It's the excuse cowards give for letting others suffer." "Mrs. Sutton." "I won't be moving to Prudence Whitmore's house. I won't be leaving this ranch. And I won't be pretending that the Christian concern of your congregation is anything but jealousy and small-mindedness dressed up in Sunday clothes." Grayson's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Caleb watched Hannah with something like wonder in his eyes. This woman who'd arrived broken and desperate, who'd begged for work at his gate, standing fierce as any warrior defending him against his own community. "I think you'd better go, Reverend," Caleb said quietly. "Before either of us says something we'll regret." Grayson retreated to his buggy without another word. As he drove away, Hannah's shoulders sagged. "I shouldn't have spoken to him like that." "You spoke truth. Nothing wrong with that." "It'll make things worse." "Maybe. Or maybe someone needed to say what everyone else was too polite to mention." Molly ran toward them, thunder in hand, oblivious to the confrontation she'd missed. "Mama, look, I found a bird feather. It's blue." Hannah crouched down, examined the feather with exaggerated interest, praised her daughter's sharp eyes. But over Molly's head, she met Caleb's gaze. The storm was coming. They both knew it. All they could do was hold on. The letter arrived a week later. Caleb found it nailed to his gatepost, written in Prudence Whitmore's precise hand. He read it once, twice, 3 times each reading, making his blood run colder. Not a threat. Worse than a threat. An ultimatum. The decent women of this community have written to the territorial authorities regarding the moral situation at your ranch. We are informed that a widow cohabiting with an unmarried man may be grounds for the removal of her child to more suitable guardianship. We pray you will make the righteous choice before such measures become necessary. Caleb's hands shook as he folded the letter. They were threatening to take Molly. Using the law, using righteousness, using every weapon. Small minds could muster, they were threatening to tear a child from her mother's arms because Hannah had committed the sin of accepting kindness from the wrong person. He found Silas in the barn. Ride to town. Find out everything you can about territorial child welfare laws. Who decides custody? What grounds they need? Everything. Silas looked at Caleb's face and didn't ask questions. I'll go now. Don't let anyone know why you're asking, especially not Prudence Whitmore or anyone in her circle. Understood. Silas saddled his horse and was gone within 10 minutes. Caleb stood alone in the barn, the letter burning in his pocket. He couldn't tell Hannah. Not yet. Not until he knew what they were facing. The thought of someone taking Molly, of some territorial official arriving to drag that laughing child from her mother's arms, no. He wouldn't let it happen, whatever it took, whatever it cost. He would not let them destroy what he was only beginning to rebuild. Dinner that night was torture. Hannah talked about the garden. Molly chattered about Maple and Thunder, and Silas teaching her to braid rope. Caleb smiled at the right moments, answered when spoken to, and felt the weight of that letter crushing his chest. After Molly went to bed, Hannah sat beside him on the porch. Something's wrong. No. Caleb. She touched his arm. I know you. Something happened today. He wanted to tell her. Wanted to share the burden, let her help him carry it. But the fear in her eyes, if she knew the terror of a mother facing the loss of her child. He couldn't do that to her. Not yet. Not until he had answers. Just tired. He covered her hand with his. Long day. You're sure? I'm sure. She didn't believe him. He could see it in her face. But she didn't push. All right. But when you're ready to tell me what's really wrong, I'll be here. She went inside. Caleb sat alone in the darkness, staring at stars that offered no answers. Silas returned the next morning with news. Territorial custody laws are vague, he said, keeping his voice low in the barn where no one else could hear. They can remove a child for moral unfitness of the parent, but it requires a formal hearing. Someone has to file a complaint. A judge has to agree. Prudence will file. Probably. But here's the thing, boss. If you were married, if Hannah was your wife, none of this would apply. A married woman living with her husband isn't improper. The whole argument falls apart. Married. Caleb turned the word over in his mind. That's not why I'd marry her. He said slowly. If I marry Hannah, when I marry Hannah, it'll be because I love her. Not because some narrow-minded busybodies forced my hand. Silas smiled. Didn't think you'd noticed. Noticed what? That you love her. Been obvious to everyone else for weeks. Caleb didn't respond, but that night, lying awake in his empty bed, he let himself feel the truth of it. He loved her. He loved Hannah Sutton, with her stubborn chin and her wounded heart, and her fierce devotion to her daughter. He loved the way she took over his kitchen without asking permission, the way she argued with him about whether to plant tomatoes or beans first, the way she looked at him across the table with something soft and wondering in her eyes. He loved her. And he would marry her. But not like this. Not with a threat hanging over their heads. Not with the town watching to see if they could be broken. First, he had to find another way to stop Prudence Whitmore. Then, and only then, he would ask Hannah Sutton to be his wife. The opportunity came 3 days later. Doc Reed arrived at the ranch unexpectedly, his buggy kicking up dust as he hurried down the road. "Caleb, need to speak with you, privately." The doctor was 60 years old, gray-bearded and sharp-eyed. He'd delivered half the babies in the territory and buried the other half's parents. People trusted him. More importantly, people told him secrets they wouldn't tell anyone else. Caleb led him into the study. "What is it?" "Prudence Whitmore." Reed lowered himself into a chair. "She's planning something. Filed a complaint with the territorial office yesterday. Says Hannah Sutton is an unfit mother living in immoral circumstances." Caleb's blood went cold. "How do you know?" "Because the territorial clerk is my nephew. He sent word this morning." "What happens now?" "Hearing in 3 weeks. Judge Morrison comes through on his circuit. If Prudence can convince him Hannah's unfit..." Reed shook his head. "I've seen children taken from good mothers for less. Once the law gets involved, it's not about truth anymore. It's about who tells the better story." 3 weeks. Caleb had 3 weeks to save Molly from being torn away from the only parent she had left. "What can I do?" "2 things." Reed leaned forward. "First, get married. Tomorrow, if possible. A married woman has different standing than a widow living with a bachelor. Changes the whole picture. And second..." Reed's eyes glittered with something that might have been satisfaction. "Prudence Whitmore has secrets, Caleb. Secrets she's spent 8 years burying. Secrets that might make a judge question whether she's the right person to be deciding who's morally fit to raise a child. Her husband died in the bed of the widow Jenkins. Prudence found them together. Heart attack took him before anyone could be called." Reed paused. "She's spent every day since pretending it never happened. Attacking anyone whose situation reminds her of her own shame. Who else knows? Me. The widow Jenkins before she moved to California. And now you." Caleb sat back processing. He had a weapon. A terrible weapon that could destroy Prudence Whitmore's credibility and save Hannah and Molly. But using it meant becoming the kind of person he despised. The kind who weaponized secrets and destroyed people for his own benefit. Was protecting Hannah worth that price? He thought of Molly's laughter, of Hannah's smile, of the way his house had come alive again after 4 years of silence. Yes, it was worth any price. "Thank you, Doc." "Don't thank me yet." Reed stood. "What you do with that information is your choice. I'm just an old man who's tired of watching good people get crushed by petty ones." He left. Caleb sat alone in his study, the weight of decision pressing down on his shoulders. 3 weeks. A marriage proposal. A secret that could destroy everything. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Hannah and Molly innocent of everything, except needing help at the wrong moment from the wrong person. He wouldn't fail them. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, he would not let them fall. Caleb didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, the lamp burning low, turning Doc Reed's words over in his mind. 3 weeks. A hearing. The possibility of Molly being taken. And the secret. Prudence Whitmore's buried shame waiting like a loaded gun. He could use it. March into town, tell everyone what really happened 8 years ago. Watch Prudence's power crumble like dry earth. But what kind of man did that make him? No better than her, maybe. Fighting poison with poison. There had to be another way. Dawn found him still sitting, still thinking, no closer to an answer. Hannah found him there. "You didn't come to bed." She stopped in the doorway, concern creasing her forehead. "Caleb, what's wrong? And don't tell me nothing. I know you." He looked at her. This woman who'd walked into his life and woken him from 4 years of death. This woman he loved more than he'd ever loved anything except Martha. She deserved the truth. "Sit down, Hannah." Something in his voice made her obey without argument. She took the chair across from his desk, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes never leaving his face. "Prudence Whitmore filed a complaint with the territorial office. She's claiming you're an unfit mother. There's going to be a hearing in 3 weeks. Hannah's face went white. What? She's trying to have Molly taken away, placed with a proper family. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Doc Reed found out yesterday. His nephew works in the territorial office. No. Hannah's voice cracked. No, she can't. They can't take my daughter. They won't. I won't let them. How? Hannah was on her feet now, pacing, her hands shaking. How can you stop a judge? How can you stop the law if they decide I'm unfit, if they decide living here makes me immoral? Then we get married. The words fell between them like stones in still water. Hannah stopped pacing. What? If we're married, the whole argument falls apart. A wife living with her husband isn't improper. There's nothing for Prudence to complain about. You can't marry me just to stop a court case. I'm not. Caleb Rose moved toward her. I'm marrying you because I love you, because I've loved you since the night you stood at my gate and lifted your chin like you expected nothing but rejection. Because Molly calls this place home now, and I want it to be her home forever. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. This isn't how it's supposed to happen. Nothing about us has been how it's supposed to happen. Caleb took her hands. You were supposed to walk on by morning. I was supposed to stay dead inside. Molly was supposed to forget how to laugh. None of that happened. So maybe supposed to doesn't matter as much as we think. Caleb, I'm not asking because of the hearing. I'm asking because I want to wake up every morning knowing you're mine and I'm yours. I'm asking because when I think about the rest of my life, I can't imagine it without you and Molly in it. A tear slipped down Hannah's cheek. What if you regret it? What if the town never accepts us? What if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow? What if the snow never melts? What if I spend another 4 years alone in this house, listening to echoes instead of laughter? Caleb cupped her face in his hands. I'm done with what if. I want what is. And what is right here, right now, is that I love you, Hannah Sutton. Will you marry me? She didn't answer with words. She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was brief, gentle, a promise rather than a passion. When she pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Caleb pulled her into his arms and held her like he'd never let go. Outside, Molly's laughter echoed across the yard. Neither of them heard the horse approaching until Silas burst through the door. Boss, we got trouble. Caleb released Hannah, instantly alert. What? Prudence Whitmore's coming. Bringing the sheriff and a man from the territorial office. They're maybe an hour behind me. Today? The hearing isn't for 3 weeks. Emergency order. Something about immediate danger to the child's welfare. Silas's face was grim. They're coming for Molly, boss. Today. Hannah made a sound like a wounded animal. No, they can't. We just... Where's Molly now? Caleb was already moving. In the barn with Maple. Get her. Bring her inside. Don't let her out of your sight. Silas ran. Caleb turned to Hannah. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Listen to me. He gripped her shoulders. We're going to fight this, together, but I need you to stay calm. Molly can't see you like this. She'll be terrified. How can I be calm? They're coming to take my baby. They're not taking anyone. Not today. Not ever. Caleb's voice was steel. Do you trust me? Hannah's eyes searched his face. Whatever she found there steadied her. I trust you. Then go be with Molly. Tell her everything's fine. Keep her inside. What are you going to do? Caleb didn't answer, but the look on his face made Hannah's blood run cold. She'd never seen him look like that before, like a man ready to burn down the world for the people he loved. Silas brought Molly inside, confused but obedient. Hannah gathered her daughter in her arms and carried her to the back room, murmuring reassurances she didn't feel. Caleb stood on the porch watching the road. An hour, maybe less. He thought about what Doc Reed had told him. Prudence's secret. The weapon he'd hoped he wouldn't have to use. Seemed like hoping was over. He walked to the barn, found the lockbox he kept in his office there. Inside was a letter he'd written late last night just in case. Everything he knew about Prudence Whitmore's husband. Everything Doc Reed had told him. Names, dates, details. He'd planned to use it as a last resort at the hearing, planned to give Prudence a chance to back down first. But Prudence had moved first. Emergency order. Coming for Molly today. She'd left him no choice. Caleb tucked the letter into his vest and returned to the porch. The wait felt like years. They appeared around the bend 40 minutes later. 3 riders and a buggy. Prudence Whitmore in the buggy, her face sharp with triumph. The sheriff on horseback looking uncomfortable. A thin man in a city suit riding beside him, the territorial official Caleb guessed. And behind them, just visible on the road, a crowd of townspeople. Coming to watch. Coming to see justice done. Or what they called justice. The procession stopped at the gate. Sheriff Tom Bailey dismounted heavily. He'd known Caleb for 15 years. They'd never been friends, but they'd been fair with each other. Caleb? Bailey's voice was apologetic. I've got papers here. Emergency removal order for the minor child Molly Sutton. On what grounds? Immoral living situation, creating immediate danger to the child's welfare. Who signed it? Judge Morrison. Mrs. Whitmore presented evidence of... What evidence? Caleb's voice was quiet. Dangerous. That a widow and her child are staying in my cabin, that I've fed them and housed them and asked nothing in return. Prudence Whitmore descended from her buggy, her black dress rustling with self-importance. Evidence of impropriety, Mr. Thornton. A bachelor rancher and a widow living in intimate circumstances. The child exposed to questionable moral influences. The judge agreed it warranted immediate action. The judge agreed based on lies. Lies. Prudence's eyes glittered. The whole town has seen you parading that woman through the streets, buying her fabric, treating her like a wife when she's nothing but a... Careful. Caleb's voice cut like a blade. You're about to say something you'll regret. I'm not afraid of you, Caleb Thornton. I'm doing what's right, what's Christian. That child deserves a proper home with proper values, not whatever shameful arrangement you've created here. The territorial official cleared his throat. Mr. Thornton, the order is legal and binding. If you refuse to comply, you'll be in contempt. The sheriff has authority to use force if necessary. Caleb looked at Bailey. The sheriff's hand was nowhere near his gun, but his deputies were watching closely. This could go very wrong, very fast. Before you take anyone from this property, Caleb said slowly, there's something you all need to know about Mrs. Whitmore. Prudence's face flickered with something that might have been fear. Whatever lies you're about to tell, no lies. Caleb pulled the letter from his vest. Just truth. The kind of truth that's been buried for 8 years. The crowd behind Prudence murmured. People pushed forward, straining to hear. 8 years ago, Caleb said, his voice carrying clearly. Reverend Whitmore died. Mrs. Whitmore has spent every day since pretending he passed peacefully in his sleep, but that's not what happened. Stop! Prudence's voice was high, frightened. You stop right there. Reverend Whitmore died in the bed of the widow Jenkins. He died in another woman's arms while his wife was at a church meeting. When Mrs. Whitmore came home and found them, she covered it up, moved the body, told everyone he'd passed in his sleep. Dead silence. Every eye turned to Prudence. Her face had gone gray. Her hands trembled at her sides. That's a lie. Doc Reed was there that night, called to attend a man who'd died of heart attack. He knows where Reverend Whitmore really died, and he knows what his wife did to hide it. I was protecting his memory. You were protecting yourself. Caleb stepped closer. You've spent 8 years attacking anyone whose situation reminded you of your own shame. Every widow who needed help. Every woman who found herself in difficult circumstances. You went after them because you couldn't face what your own husband did. Prudence's face crumpled. He was supposed to love me. The words came out broken. He was supposed to be a man of God, and I'm sorry for what he did. Caleb's voice softened just slightly. No woman should have to bear that betrayal. But taking your pain out on innocent people won't heal it. Tearing a child from her mother won't bring your husband back or make him faithful. Prudence was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook her thin frame. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Sheriff Bailey rubbed his face, looking like a man who wanted to be anywhere else. "Mr. Thornton," the territorial official said slowly, "this is all very dramatic, but it doesn't change the legal status of the removal order." "Doesn't it?" Caleb turned to face him. "Your order was filed by a woman with a clear personal vendetta. A woman who's been persecuting innocent people to hide her own scandal. You really want to stand in front of a judge and defend that?" The official's jaw tightened. "The order stands until a judge says otherwise." "Then let's talk about what happens if you try to enforce it." Caleb stepped between the official and the house. "I'm not going to draw on you. I'm not going to fight your deputies, but I am going to marry Hannah Sutton. Today. Right now. And the moment we're married, your entire case collapses. You can't get married today. The minister doesn't have to be a minister." Caleb looked at the crowd. "Anyone here know what a common law marriage requires in Wyoming territory?" Silas raised his hand. "Two willing adults declaring themselves married in front of witnesses." "We've got plenty of witnesses right here." The official sputtered. "That's not, you can't just can and will." Caleb turned toward the house. "Hannah, come out here." The door opened. Hannah emerged, Molly's hand in hers. Her face was pale but determined. "Hannah Sutton," Caleb's voice carried across the yard. "I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you and Molly. Will you be my wife?" "Yes." Hannah's voice was clear as a bell. "I'll be your wife." "Then in front of all these witnesses I declare us married. From this day forward we're husband and wife." "You can't do this!" The official was almost shouting now. "Already done." Caleb put his arm around Hannah. "She's my wife. Molly's my stepdaughter. And if you want to take that child, you'll have to go through me." Silence stretched across the yard. Sheriff Bailey shifted on his feet. "Mr. Whitaker," he said to the territorial official, "I'm not sure this is worth—" "The order stands." "Does it?" Bailey looked at Caleb, at Hannah, at the crying child between them. Then he looked at the crowd, at faces that had been hostile an hour ago, now uncertain, now questioning. "These are good people, Marcus. Man opened his door to a starving widow, took her in when no one else would, and now we're supposed to drag her daughter away because some busybody got her feelings hurt. The law is supposed to protect people, not punish them for kindness." The official's face reddened. "I have an order from a territorial judge, and I have a conscience." Bailey took off his hat, wiped his forehead. "I'm not enforcing this, Marcus. Take it up with Judge Morrison if you want, but I'm done here." He turned, walked back to his horse mounted up. His deputies followed without a word. The official stood alone, surrounded by a crowd that had turned from spectators to jury. "This isn't over." He pointed at Caleb. "I'll file contempt charges. I'll have you arrested." "You do that." Caleb didn't flinch. "And while you're at it, ask yourself if you really want to be the man who tore apart a family because Prudence Whitmore couldn't face her own husband's sins." The official had no answer for that. He retreated to the buggy, climbed in beside the still weeping Prudence, and drove away. The crowd lingered a moment longer. Then, one by one, they drifted back toward town. Some looked at Caleb with something like respect. Others just looked uncomfortable. When they were finally gone, Hannah collapsed against Caleb's chest. "Is it over?" "I don't know." He held her tight. "But we're still standing. That's what matters." Molly tugged at his sleeve. Mr. Caleb, are we married now? Does that mean you're my papa? Caleb knelt down to her level. Do you want me to be? Molly considered this with the gravity of all her 8 years. Yes. She nodded firmly. Thunder wants you to be my papa too. He told me. Then I'd be honored. Molly threw her arms around his neck. Caleb held her, this child who'd walked into his life 2 months ago, hungry and frightened and desperate. His daughter now. Whatever the law said, whatever the territory decided, she was his, and he would protect her with everything he had. The storm hit that night. Not the human storm that had passed, at least for now. This was nature's fury, winter's last gasp, roaring down from the mountains without warning. Wind screamed across the valley. Snow drove sideways, thick and blinding. The temperature plummeted so fast the windows cracked from the cold. Caleb and Silas worked frantically to secure the animals. The barn shuddered under the assault. Cattle bellowed in terror. Horses kicked at their stalls. We've got to get them calmed down, Silas shouted over the wind. They'll hurt themselves. You take the horses, I'll handle the cattle. They split up. Caleb fought his way through the barn, talking low and steady to the frightened animals, checking fences, making sure nothing could break loose. The wind found every crack, every gap. Snow swirled inside the barn, coating everything in white. Caleb didn't know how long he worked. An hour, maybe 2. His hands went numb. His face burned from the cold. When he finally staggered back to the house, Silas met him at the door. Hannah's looking for Molly. Everything inside Caleb froze. What do you mean, looking for Molly? The girl's not in the house. Hannah thought she was in bed, but when she went to check, Caleb was already running. He burst through the back door. The storm hit him like a fist. He couldn't see 3 feet in front of his face. Molly! His voice was swallowed by the wind. Molly! Hannah appeared beside him, coatless, frantic. She's not anywhere. I checked every room. She was supposed to be sleeping, but her bed's empty, and I can't find her. The barn. Caleb grabbed Hannah's shoulders. She loves Maple. If she woke up scared, she might have... He didn't finish. He ran. The distance from the house to the barn was 50 yards. In normal weather, less than a minute's walk. In this storm, it felt like miles. Caleb reached the barn, tore open the door. Molly, are you in here? No answer but the wind. He searched every stall, every corner, every hiding place a scared child might find. Nothing. She's not here, he told Silas, who'd followed him. Check the other buildings, every one of them. In this storm? She's 8 years old and she's out there somewhere. Go. They split up again. Caleb searched the equipment shed, the chicken coop, the smokehouse. Nothing. 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 The cold was killing. Even in his heavy coat, he could feel his strength draining. An 8-year-old in a nightgown wouldn't last 20 minutes in this. Where would she go? Think. Think like a child. Molly loved Maple, but she wasn't in this barn. She loved the garden, but that was buried under snow. She loved the cabin. The foreman's cabin where she and Hannah had stayed that first night, where Molly had felt safe for the first time in months. Caleb ran. The cabin was dark. Snow had piled against the door. He shoved through, calling her name. Molly, Molly, are you here? A small sound from the corner, a whimper. Caleb crossed the room in 3 strides, found her huddled behind the stove, wrapped in an old blanket, shaking so hard her teeth rattled. Papa! Her voice was barely a whisper. I was scared. The wind was so loud and I wanted to come back here, but then I couldn't find my way home and... Caleb scooped her up, blanket and all. I've got you. I've got you, sweetheart. You're safe. He pressed her against his chest, trying to share his warmth with her frozen little body. Her skin was ice. Her lips were blue. Stay awake, Molly. Keep talking to me. Can you do that? I'm so cold, Papa. I know, but we're going home now. Your mama's waiting. He carried her out into the storm. The wind tried to push him back. The snow tried to blind him. But Caleb had walked this land for 15 years. He knew every step, every landmark, every fence post. He found his way. Hannah was waiting at the door, her face a mask of terror. When she saw Molly in Caleb's arms, she made a sound that wasn't quite human. "She's alive." Caleb pushed past her into the warmth. "Get blankets, hot water. We need to warm her up slowly." They worked together, stripping off Molly's wet nightgown, wrapping her in heated blankets, making her drink warm broth, sip by tiny sip. Slowly the color came back to her cheeks. The shaking eased. Her eyes grew clearer. "I'm sorry, Mama." Tears streamed down Molly's face. "I was so scared. The wind was like monsters, and I wanted to go back to our cabin, but then I got lost." "It's all right, sweetheart." Hannah held her daughter tight. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." Caleb sat beside them, exhausted beyond words. Hannah met his eyes over Molly's head. "You saved her. Almost didn't find her in time. But you did." Hannah's voice broke. "You saved our daughter. Our daughter." The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. He'd never had a child of his own. Martha had wanted one desperately. They'd tried for years. When she died, he'd thought that dream died with her. But now, sitting here with this woman and this child, he had a family again. Broken, imperfect, built from desperation and necessity, and finally love. But a family. His family. "Papa?" Molly's voice was sleepy, warm, safe. "Yes, sweetheart." "Will the storm be gone tomorrow?" Caleb looked toward the window. The wind still howled, but it was starting to ease. The worst was passing. "Probably. Storms never last forever." "Good." Molly yawned. "Because Thunder wants to see Maple. He missed her today." Hannah smiled through her tears. Caleb pulled them both close, his wife and his daughter, and held on tight. Outside, the storm raged itself out. Inside, they were safe. Morning came quiet and clean. The storm had passed, leaving the world transformed. Snow covered everything in white, softening hard edges, burying the ugliness beneath. Fresh snow meant fresh starts. Caleb's mother had always said that. Maybe she'd been right. He stood on the porch, watching dawn paint the valley pink and gold. Hannah joined him, coffee in hand, Molly still sleeping in the bed where they'd placed her last night. "She's going to be fine," Hannah said. "Doc Reed came by this morning while you were in the barn. Said she's young and strong. No permanent damage." "Good." "Caleb." Hannah touched his arm. "What happens now? With the territory? With Prudence?" "I don't know. Maybe they'll come back with more papers. Maybe they'll realize it's not worth the fight." "And if they do come back..." Caleb looked at her. This woman he'd married yesterday in front of half the town, in the most unconventional wedding Wyoming territory had ever seen. "Then we fight, together, until there's nothing left to fight." Hannah leaned against him. "I never thought I'd have this again. A home, a family, someone willing to stand beside me no matter what." Neither did I. They stood together, watching the sun rise over their land. Behind them, Molly's voice called out sleepily, "Mama, Papa, I'm hungry." Hannah smiled. "Duty calls." She went inside. Caleb stayed on the porch a moment longer, looking out at the white landscape. The gate was still visible, half buried in snow, but standing. Open. Always open. Whatever came next, they'd face it. 3 days after the storm, Caleb made a decision. "We're going to church Sunday." Hannah looked up from the bread she was kneading, her hands stilled in the dough. "Church? We haven't been since all this started. People are talking about that too. Saying we're ashamed. Saying we're hiding." "Aren't we hiding? I mean, maybe. But I'm done with it." Caleb set down his coffee cup. "We got married in front of half the town. Time to finish what we started." Hannah wiped flour from her hands. "Prudence will be there. Probably. She'll make a scene. Let her try. Caleb. Hannah moved closer, touched his arm. The last time we confronted her, you exposed her deepest secret. She'll be looking for revenge. I know. And you still want to go? Caleb met her eyes. This woman he'd married 3 days ago. This woman who'd taught him how to live again. I spent 4 years avoiding that church because it reminded me of Martha. 4 years hiding from my own grief. I'm not hiding anymore, Hannah. From anything or anyone. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right. We'll go. You sure? You stood up for me in front of the whole town. The least I can do is stand beside you in church. Caleb kissed her forehead. That's my wife. The word still felt strange on his tongue. Wife. He'd thought he'd never say it again after Martha. But here he was, married, father to a little girl who called him Papa, starting over at 42 years old. Life had a way of surprising you, if you let it. Sunday arrived cold and clear. Caleb hitched the wagon while Hannah dressed Molly in her best clothes. The child was excited, bouncing on her toes. Will there be other children at church, Mama? Yes, sweetheart. Will they want to play with me? Hannah and Caleb exchanged a look. Neither knew the answer to that. Children could be cruel when their parents were. We'll see, Hannah said carefully. Just stay close to Papa and me, all right? All right? They rode to town in silence. The road was muddy from the melting snow, but the sun was warm. Spring was finally truly arriving. The church appeared around the bend, white steeple reaching toward heaven. People already gathering outside, waiting for service to begin. Caleb felt Hannah tense beside him. We can turn back, he said quietly. No one would blame us. No. Hannah's chin lifted. That stubborn chin he loved so much. We're doing this. He helped her down from the wagon. Took Molly's hand. Together, the three of them walked toward the church. Conversation stopped. Every head turned. Caleb kept walking. The crowd parted to let them through. Some faces were hostile. Others were uncertain. A few Doc Reed Silas the storekeeper, Howard Beck nodded in silent support. They reached the church door. Reverend Grayson stood in the entrance blocking their path. His face was pale, conflicted. Caleb? Mrs. Thornton. He still stumbled over Hannah's new name. I wasn't expecting you. It's Sunday. We came to worship. Yes, of course, but... Grayson glanced over his shoulder. There may be some... discomfort, given recent events. There's always discomfort when people do the right thing. That's how you know it matters. Grayson had no response to that. Caleb stepped past him, Hannah and Molly close behind. The church interior was already half full, heads swiveled as they entered. Whispers rippled through the congregation. Caleb walked to his usual pew, third row, right side. The pew he'd shared with Martha for 15 years. He sat down. Hannah sat beside him. Molly climbed onto the bench between them, clutching thunder. The whispers continued. Caleb ignored them. Hannah's hand found his. Her fingers were cold. Trembling. He squeezed gently. I'm here. We're together. That's all that matters. She squeezed back. The service began. Grayson preached on forgiveness. His eyes kept darting to Caleb's pew, then away. The sermon felt pointed, but Caleb couldn't tell which direction it was pointing. Forgiveness for who? The people who'd tried to tear his family apart, or the man who'd exposed an 8-year-old secret to protect his daughter? Maybe both. Maybe that was the point. After the sermon, Grayson called for testimonials, a moment for anyone to share what God had placed on their heart. Caleb hadn't planned to speak, but something pushed him to his feet. The church went silent, every eye fixed on him, some hostile, some curious, all waiting. Most of you know what happened last week. His voice was calm, steady. What you might not know is why. He looked around the room, at faces he'd known for years, neighbors he'd helped in hard times, people who'd helped him when Martha died. 2 months ago, a woman and her child showed up at my gate. They'd been walking 3 days, starving, freezing, desperate. He found Hannah's eyes, drew strength from them. I could have turned them away, could have pointed them toward town and told them someone else's problem. That's what a careful man would have done. A man worried about his reputation, a man afraid of what people might say. He paused. I chose different. The church was utterly silent now. Even the children had stopped fidgeting. I don't regret that choice. Not for a second. Because that woman is now my wife. That child is now my daughter. And this ranch, this life I've been living like a ghost for 4 years, finally means something again. He turned to face the congregation fully. Some of you judged me for what I did. Some of you tried to take my daughter away because you didn't approve of how we came together. You called it improper, immoral, unchristian. His voice hardened. But I read my Bible same as you. And I remember a story about a man beaten on the road to Jericho. The priest walked by. The Levite walked by. Only the Samaritan stopped to help. He let that sink in. I'm not comparing myself to the Good Samaritan. I'm just a rancher who opened a gate. But I wonder when you walked by that woman and child on the road, when you decided it was safer to let them starve than risk your reputation. Which character in that story were you? Silence. Then, from the back of the church, a voice. Amen. Caleb turned. Doc Reed stood up, his weathered face solemn. Amen, he said again. I've watched this town tear itself apart over gossip and propriety for too many years. Caleb Thornton did what the rest of us were too cowardly to do. He helped someone who needed helping. If that's a sin, I'll take my chances at the pearly gates. He sat down. Another voice rose. Howard Beck, the storekeeper. I sold that woman fabric and watched my own wife whisper about her behind her back. I'm not proud of that. Caleb's right. We all walked by when we should have stopped. More murmurs. More voices joining. Not everyone. Prudence Whitmore sat rigid in her pew, face like stone. Her allies clustered around her, silent but disapproving. But enough. Enough voices rising in support. Enough people finally saying what they'd been too afraid to say. Caleb sat down. Hannah was crying silently beside him. Molly patted her mother's hand. Don't cry, Mama. Papa made everyone be nice. Hannah laughed through her tears. Yes, sweetheart, Papa did. After service, people approached. Not everyone, but more than Caleb expected. Clara Bennett, the general store owner's wife, was first. She'd been one of Prudence's closest allies. Now she stood before Hannah with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, her voice cracked. I said terrible things about you. I judged you without knowing anything. Can you forgive me? Hannah took Clara's hands. Of course. I want you to come to my quilting circle, this Tuesday. Will you? Hannah glanced at Caleb. He nodded. I'll be there. Clara squeezed her hands and hurried away, dabbing at her eyes. Others followed. Men who'd canceled contracts now mumbling about reconsidering. Women who'd whispered behind fans now offering awkward apologies. Not everyone. Prudence Whitmore pushed through the crowd. She stopped directly in front of Caleb. Her face was ravaged, dark circles under her eyes, deep lines carved by 3 days of grief and rage. You destroyed me. Caleb met her gaze without flinching. I protected my family. You told everyone my shame. You made me a laughingstock. You tried to take my daughter. You used the law as a weapon against innocent people. What did you expect me to do? Prudence's hands shook at her sides. I was trying to do what was right. No. Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. You were trying to make yourself feel righteous. There's a difference. Prudence flinched like he'd struck her. My husband. Your husband betrayed you. That was his sin, not yours. But spending 8 years punishing other women for what he did, that's on you, Prudence. That's your choice. Tears spilled down Prudence's weathered cheeks. I don't know how to stop. The words came out broken. I've been angry so long. I don't know how to be anything else. Hannah stepped forward. Caleb tensed, ready to protect her from whatever Prudence might do. But Hannah didn't attack, didn't accuse. She took Prudence's hand. I know what it's like. Hannah's voice was soft. To be angry at someone you loved. To carry that anger until it poisons everything. My husband worked himself to death rather than admit he'd made a mistake. I was furious at him for years. Prudence stared at her. How did you stop? I found someone worth living for instead of dying for. Hannah glanced at Caleb, then back at Prudence. The anger didn't disappear, but it got smaller. Small enough to carry without it crushing me. Prudence's face crumpled. I don't have anyone. You could. Hannah squeezed her hand. If you stopped pushing everyone away. For a long moment, Prudence just stood there, crying, broken, all her armor stripped away. Then she pulled her hand free. I can't, she whispered. I don't know how. She turned and walked away, through the crowd, out the church door, gone. Caleb watched her go. She might come around eventually, Hannah said quietly. Maybe, maybe not. Some people are too broken to rebuild. You weren't. Caleb looked at his wife, this woman who'd walked into his life and rebuilt everything. I had you, he said simply. They walked out of the church together, Molly skipping between them. The sun was warm on their faces. Spring had finally arrived. The days that followed were strange. People who'd shunned them now tipped their hats. Women who'd whispered now smiled. The town was trying clumsily, awkwardly to make amends. Not everyone. Some doors stayed closed, some faces stayed hard. But enough. Enough to make the ranch feel less like an island and more like part of a community. Morrison came back with his cattle contract. Then Henderson, shamefaced and apologetic. My wife was wrong. Henderson said, hat in hands. I was wrong for listening to her. If you'll still do business with me, I'll do business with anyone who deals fair, Caleb said. Past is past. Henderson's relief was visible. Thank you, Caleb. I won't forget this. He drove away. Hannah watched from the porch. You forgave him easy. No point holding grudges. Life's too short. Even after what they tried to do. Caleb turned to face her. If I hold on to anger, it just keeps hurting me. They don't feel it. I do. Better to let it go. You're a better person than me. No. He smiled. Just older. Had more time to learn what matters. Molly burst out of the house, thunder in one hand, a letter in the other. Papa Silas brought mail. There's a letter from the territory. Caleb's smile faded. He took the letter. Official seal. Territorial office. Hannah's hand found his arm. Open it. He did. Read it once, twice, 3 times. Then he started to laugh. What? Hannah grabbed the letter. What does it say? Complaint withdrawn. Case dismissed. No further action required. What? Prudence withdrew her complaint. The territorial office is closing the case. It's over, Hannah. Really over. Hannah stared at the letter, at the official seal, at the words that meant her daughter was safe. Then she threw her arms around Caleb and held on like she'd never let go. It's over, she whispered against his chest. It's really over. It's over. Molly tugged at both their sleeves. What's over? What happened? Caleb knelt down to her level. Remember the bad people who wanted to take you away? Molly's face clouded. The scary lady? She changed her mind. She's not trying to take you anymore. You're staying here. Forever. With Mama and me. Molly's eyes went wide. Forever and ever. Forever and ever. The child threw herself into his arms with such force he nearly toppled backward. "I love you, Papa." "I love you too, sweetheart." Hannah wrapped her arms around both of them. The three of them knelt in the dirt, holding each other, crying and laughing at the same time. Silas watched from the barn door, grinning like a fool. "About damn time," he muttered and went back to work. That night, Hannah and Caleb sat on the porch. Molly was asleep inside, thunder clutched under her chin, dreaming whatever happy dreams 8-year-olds dream. The stars blazed overhead, brighter than they had in years, or maybe Caleb was just seeing them clearly for the first time. "Tell me about Martha." The request surprised him. Hannah had never asked before. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. What she was like, what you loved about her, what you miss." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "She was small, barely came up to my shoulder, but she was fierce. Fought me on everything from where to build the barn to what color to paint the kitchen. Won most of those fights too." Hannah smiled. She loved growing things. Flowers, vegetables, didn't matter what. She'd stick seeds in dirt and talk to them like they were children. His voice roughened. "When we found out we couldn't have kids, she cried for 3 days. Then she dried her eyes and said we'd just have to love each other enough for a whole family." "She sounds wonderful." She was. Best person I ever knew. Caleb turned to face Hannah. "Until you." Don't compare us." "I'm not comparing. You're different people, different loves, but both real, both precious." Hannah's eyes glistened. "I was so afraid of this," she admitted. "Falling in love again, letting myself depend on someone. After William, I promised myself I'd never be that vulnerable again. And now I'm terrified." She laughed softly, "But also happier than I've been in years, maybe ever." "That sounds about right." "Caleb," Hannah turned to face him fully, "I need you to know something. I didn't marry you just because of the hearing. I would have married you anyway. Maybe not that day, but eventually. I love you." "I know." "Do you? Because sometimes I worry you think this is all just circumstance, convenience. That if Prudence hadn't forced our hand." Caleb stopped her with a kiss. When he pulled back, Hannah was breathless. "I love you," he said. "Not because you needed help. Not because Molly needed a father. Because you walked into my life and woke me up from the grave I'd been living in. Because you argue with me about tomatoes and make biscuits that could make angels weep. Because when I think about tomorrow, you're the first thing I want to see." Hannah's tears spilled over. "That's the most words you've said at once since I met you." "Don't get used to it." She laughed and he pulled her close and they sat together watching stars wheel overhead. Two broken people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment. Two halves of a whole neither knew they were missing. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Caleb was checking fences when he saw the buggy approaching. Unfamiliar horse. Unfamiliar driver. He walked toward the gate hand, instinctively moving toward the rifle he wasn't carrying. Old habits. The buggy stopped. A woman climbed down. Young, maybe 25. Dark hair under a simple bonnet. A child in her arms. Caleb's heart clenched. He'd seen this before. A desperate woman. A child. The road that led to his gate. "Can I help you?" The woman looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "I'm looking for Caleb Thornton." "You found him." "I heard—" She stopped, started again. "People in town said you help people. Widows. Women with nowhere to go." "Who told you that?" "A woman named Clara Bennett. Said you took in a widow and her daughter, made them family." The woman's voice cracked. "My husband died 2 weeks ago. His family took the farm. Said a woman couldn't run it alone. I've got nothing left, nowhere to go. My boy—" She looked at the child in her arms. He's only 3. He doesn't understand why his papa isn't coming home. Caleb looked at her, at the exhaustion in her face, at the desperation she was trying to hide, at the small boy who stared at him with wide, frightened eyes. He thought about what he'd told the church, about the road to Jericho, about who stops and who walks by. What's your name? Mary Collins. Well, Mary Collins. Caleb pushed open the gate. You'd better come inside. Her face crumpled with relief. Thank you. I'll work. I'll do anything. I just need... You need food and rest and a safe place for your boy. Work can wait. Hannah appeared on the porch. She took one look at Mary Collins, one look at Caleb, and understood immediately. Bring her in, Hannah called. I'll make coffee. Mary walked through the gate, clutching her son, tears streaming down her face. Caleb watched her go. Then he looked at the gate, still standing open. Always open. He'd built these fences to keep things out, to protect himself from a world that had taken everything he loved. But somewhere along the way, the fences had become something else. Not barriers, boundaries. Markers that said, this is mine to protect. This is mine to share. Hannah appeared beside him. Another stray. Looks like. We're going to need a bigger house. Probably. She slipped her hand into his. I love you, Caleb Thornton. I love you too, Hannah Thornton. They walked toward the house together. Behind them, the gate stood open, waiting for whoever might need it next. Inside, Molly was already showing Mary's son her wooden horse. His name is Thunder, Molly explained seriously. He's magic. He keeps bad dreams away. The little boy reached for the horse. Molly let him hold it. You can borrow him tonight, she said, because you're scared, but tomorrow he comes back to me okay. The boy nodded solemnly. Hannah watched from the doorway, tears in her eyes. Her daughter. Her fierce, kind, generous daughter. Learning to share the way Caleb had shared with them. Kindness was contagious. That was the lesson of all this. One person opens a gate. Another person walks through. Then they open a gate for someone else. On and on. A chain of mercy stretching forward into the future. Caleb joined Hannah in the doorway. You all right? Better than all right. She leaned against him. I'm home. So am I. He kissed the top of her head. So am I. Mary Collins stayed. Not because Caleb asked her to. Not because she had nowhere else to go. Because somewhere between that first cup of coffee and the third day of watching Molly teach her son Jacob how to feed chickens, she realized this place was different. These people were different. You don't have to keep thanking me, Caleb said on the 4th morning when Mary tried again to express her gratitude. Just pass it on someday. That's all the thanks I need. Mary looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. I don't understand people like you. Nothing to understand. Someone helped me once when I didn't deserve it. Now I help others. That's how it works. That's not how it works. Mary shook her head. Not in my experience. In my experience, people take what they can get and leave you with nothing. Then you've been around the wrong people. Hannah appeared with fresh coffee. She'd taken to Mary immediately 2 widows who understood each other's grief without needing words to explain it. He's right, you know, Hannah said, filling Mary's cup. I thought the same thing when I arrived. Couldn't believe anyone would help without expecting something in return. And now I'm married to him. Hannah smiled. And I spend my days trying to be half as good as he makes me want to be. Caleb's ears turned red. You give me too much credit. I give you exactly the right amount. Hannah kissed his cheek. Now go check on the horses. Silas said Maple was acting strange this morning. Caleb went. Hannah sat down across from Mary. He saved us, Hannah said quietly. Me and Molly. We were 3 days from dying when we reached his gate. He didn't know us. didn't owe us anything, but he opened that gate and let us in. Why? Because that's who he is, a man who sees someone in need and can't walk away. Hannah's voice softened. I fought it at first, thought there had to be a catch, some hidden price I'd have to pay later. Took me weeks to understand some people are just good, not perfect, not saints, just good. Mary looked toward the barn where Caleb had disappeared. My husband wasn't like that. The words came out bitter. He was charming when he wanted something, cold when he didn't. I spent 6 years trying to be enough for him, never was. I'm sorry. Don't be. He's gone now. I should feel sad, but mostly I just feel... Mary stopped. Is it terrible that I feel relieved? No. Hannah reached across the table, took Mary's hand. I felt the same when William died. Grief and relief all tangled together. Took me months to sort it out. Did you? Eventually, Caleb helped, not by fixing anything, just by being there, by letting me feel whatever I needed to feel without judging me for it. Mary's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to do this. Start over. Build something new. I'm so tired of being strong. Then rest. Hannah squeezed her hand. You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you. No one's going to take anything from you. Just rest and let yourself heal. Mary broke down. Hannah held her while she cried, saying nothing, just being present. In the yard, Molly and Jacob played with Thunder, the wooden horse. Their laughter drifted through the window. 2 children who'd known too much hardship, learning how to be children again. That was worth everything. The town continued its awkward reconciliation. Clara Bennett's quilting circle welcomed Hannah with genuine warmth. The other women, many who'd whispered about her just weeks ago, now competed to sit beside her to hear her stories, to apologize in their own sideways fashion. We were wrong about you, Clara said during Hannah's 3rd visit. About Caleb, too. I hope you can forgive us. I already have. Just like that. Holding grudges is exhausting. Hannah threaded her needle. I'd rather spend my energy on people who deserve it. The women exchanged glances. Some looked ashamed. Others looked thoughtful. One woman, Eleanor Patterson, whose husband had been among the first to cancel cattle contracts, spoke up. My mother always said you can judge a person by how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Eleanor's voice was quiet. Caleb helped you when you had nothing. No money, no influence, nothing to offer except your company. That's right. My husband canceled his contract because he was afraid of what people would say. Eleanor's jaw tightened. I was ashamed of him, still am a little, even though he's made it right since then. He came back, Hannah said. That's what matters. Is it enough, though, just coming back after you've done wrong? Hannah set down her sewing. I don't know if it's enough, but it's a start, and sometimes a start is all you get. The women fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Clara picked up her needle and said, Well, enough philosophy. We've got a quilt to finish. The spring social is next month, and I'll be damned if the Methodist ladies beat us to the prize again. Laughter broke the tension. Hannah smiled and returned to her work. She was starting to belong here. That evening, Caleb found her in the garden. Spring had arrived in full. The seeds they'd planted together were pushing up through dark earth. Green shoots in neat rows, promising vegetables and flowers, and all the abundance of summer. You look happy, Caleb said, kneeling beside her. I am happy. Hannah brushed dirt from her hands. I didn't think I could be again, after everything. But here we are. Here we are. The quilting circle invited me to help plan the spring social. Can you believe it? The same women who whispered about me 2 months ago? People change. Do they really? Caleb considered the question. Some do. Some don't. The ones who matter find a way to grow. The others, he shrugged. They stay stuck, Not much you can do about it except feel sorry for them. Prudence hasn't come back to church. No. Do you think she will? I don't know. Caleb pulled a weed from between the carrot rows. She's carrying a lot of pain. Pain she put there herself mostly. Hard to let go of something you've held that long. I feel sorry for her. Caleb looked up surprised. After everything she did? Because of everything she did. Hannah's voice was soft. She must be so lonely, living with that secret for 8 years, attacking anyone who reminded her of her own shame. That's not a life. That's a prison. You've got a generous heart, Hannah Thornton. I learned from a generous man. They worked the garden together until the light faded. Molly and Jacob played nearby, their laughter punctuating the quiet evening. Mary watched from the cabin porch, her face still marked by grief, but softer now, less hunted. This is what it's supposed to be, Hannah said suddenly. What? Life. Family. This? She gestured at the ranch, the garden, the children, playing the people who'd become something more than strangers. I spent so many years surviving, just getting through each day. I forgot what it felt like to actually live. Caleb pulled her close. Then let's live, he said. For as long as we've got. Let's live every minute of it. Hannah leaned against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Strong, steady, home. The spring social arrived with all the chaos such events demanded. The whole town gathered in the churchyard. Tables groaned under the weight of food. Children ran wild between adults' legs. Music drifted from a makeshift bandstand where 3 old men tortured fiddles with more enthusiasm than skill. Caleb and Hannah arrived with Molly between them, Mary and Jacob following close behind. The crowd parted, but this time not in judgment, in welcome. Caleb, Hannah. Howard Beck waved them toward his table. Saved you seats. Best view of the band, though, that might not be a selling point given how they play. They settled into the celebration. Molly dragged Jacob off to join the other children. Mary sat stiffly at first, but Clara Bennett drew her into conversation, and slowly she began to relax. Hannah watched her new family spread through the community like seeds finding fertile soil. You're crying, Caleb said quietly. Happy tears. Hannah wiped her eyes. I never thought I'd have this again. Belonging somewhere. Being part of something. You've always belonged. Just took the rest of us a while to catch up. Caleb Thornton, when did you become a poet? Must be your influence. The afternoon stretched long and warm. People ate too much, laughed too loud, danced badly to worse music. Children collapsed in exhausted heaps. Old grudges were forgotten in the shared pleasure of spring finally arriving. As the sun began to set, Reverend Grayson stood on the bandstand. If I could have everyone's attention. The crowd quieted. Before we end this wonderful day, there's something I need to say. Grayson looked uncomfortable, but determined. These past few months have tested our community, tested who we are and what we stand for. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I'm not proud of how I handled things. I tried to please everyone and ended up pleasing no one. I let fear of conflict stop me from standing up for what was right. He looked directly at Caleb and Hannah. Mr. and Mrs. Thornton showed us what real courage looks like. They stood against the whole town to protect their family, and instead of supporting them, many of us, myself included, made their lives harder. The murmurs grew louder. Some people shifted uncomfortably. So I want to say publicly and clearly I was wrong. This community was wrong. And I hope we've learned something from it. He paused. The Bible tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves. It doesn't say love the neighbors who look like us or think like us or meet our standards of propriety. It says love our neighbors, period. Grayson stepped down from the bandstand. I hope we can do better. I know I'm going to try. Silence held for a long moment. Then Doc Reed started clapping. Others joined. Slowly at first, then building. Not everyone, some faces remained stony, but enough. Enough to matter. Caleb stood. Reverend, his voice carried across the yard. I appreciate the words, but words are easy. What matters is what we do tomorrow, and the day after that. You're right. So here's what I propose. Caleb looked around at the gathered townspeople. My ranch has more room than I need. Always has. If anyone in this community or outside it needs help, they come to me. I'll do what I can. He paused. But I can't do it alone. So I'm asking, who else is willing? Who else has room at their table? A spare bed. Work that needs doing. Who else is willing to be the person who stops instead of walking by? Silence. Then Howard Beck raised his hand. I've got a storage room behind the general store. Could make it into living quarters if someone needed a place to stay. The church has funds we've been saving for repairs. Grayson added, we could use some of that to help families in need. More hands went up, more offers. People competing to be generous, the way they'd once competed to be judgmental. Hannah watched with tears streaming down her face. This was what Caleb had built. Not just a family, a community. A web of people willing to catch each other when they fell. One gate opened, and others followed. That was the miracle. Not that one man had chosen kindness. That his kindness had spread like wildfire until the whole town caught flame. The social ended with dancing. Not good dancing. Enthusiastic dancing. The kind where no one cared about steps or rhythm, only about moving together, celebrating together, being alive together. Caleb swept Hannah into his arms and spun her across the makeshift dance floor. I can't dance, she protested, laughing. Neither can I. That's why we're perfect for each other. They stumbled through something that might have been a waltz, surrounded by equally clumsy couples, all of them laughing at their own inadequacy. Molly danced with Jacob, the two children serious as judges trying to copy the adults' movements. Mary danced with Silas, who turned out to have hidden grace despite his weathered appearance. Even Reverend Grayson danced, partnered with Clara Bennett, both of them red-faced and breathless. The sun set. Lanterns were lit. The music played on. And for one perfect evening, the whole town forgot its divisions and remembered what community was supposed to mean. They returned home exhausted and happy. Molly fell asleep in the wagon, Jacob curled beside her. Mary dozed against the seat back, her face peaceful for the first time since she'd arrived. Caleb drove with one hand, his other arm around Hannah. Good day, Hannah murmured. Best day. Think it'll last. The change in the town. Some of it, not all. People are people. They'll slip back into old habits. But the seeds planted now can't unplant a seed. That's almost philosophical. Must be the moonlight. Makes me poetic. Hannah laughed softly and nestled closer. They reached the ranch as the moon climbed high. Caleb carried Molly inside, then helped Mary get Jacob to bed. The cabin that had once felt empty now felt crowded with life. Good crowded. Full crowded. The kind of crowded that meant you were never alone. Hannah was waiting on the porch when he emerged. Come look at something. She led him to the gate. The same gate where she'd stood 3 months ago, desperate and starving, and ready to beg for scraps. This is where it started, she said. Right here. You opened this gate and everything changed. You changed things, just by showing up. We changed things together. Hannah turned to face him. That's what I want. For the rest of my life. Changing things together. Building things together. Being together. You've already got that. I know. She smiled. I just wanted to say it out loud. In this place. Where it all began. Caleb pulled her close. I love you, Hannah Thornton. I love you too, Caleb Thornton. They stood at the gate holding each other, while the moon painted the valley silver and the stars wheeled overhead. 2 months later, summer arrived in full glory. The garden Hannah had planted burst with vegetables. The ranch prospered. Mary had moved into the old foreman's cabin, permanently earning her keep by helping with meals and mending. though Caleb still insisted she was a guest. Molly and Jacob had become inseparable. They spent their days exploring the ranch, building forts from hay bales, terrorizing the chickens with their adventures. And the gate stayed open. 3 more families came through that summer. Widows, orphans, men down on their luck. Some stayed a few days, some stayed longer. All left better than they arrived. Word spread. The Thornton Ranch became known as a place where people in need could find help. Not charity. Caleb hated that word, but opportunity. A chance to rest, to heal, to figure out what came next. "You're building something," Doc Reed observed during a visit. "Something bigger than a ranch. Just doing what needs doing. That's what all the great ones say." The doctor smiled. "Mark my words, Caleb. 100 years from now, people will still be telling stories about the man who opened his gate. I don't need stories. Just need to know I did right by the people who came through. You did. You are. That's the whole point." One evening in late August, Hannah found Caleb on the porch. He was staring at something in his hands. A small box, worn leather, old. "What's that?" Caleb opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple gold band with a small sapphire. "Martha's." His voice was rough. "I kept it after she died. Couldn't bring myself to look at it, but couldn't throw it away either." Hannah sat beside him. "Why are you looking at it now?" "Because I want to give it to you." Hannah's breath caught. "Caleb, we got married fast. No time for rings or ceremonies or any of the proper things. I want to fix that." He turned to face her. "Hannah, will you marry me again? The right way this time. In the church, in front of everyone, with a dress and flowers and all the things you deserve." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "You want to marry me with your first wife's ring? I want the 2 women I've loved most in this world to be connected somehow. Martha would have loved you. I know she would. And this ring..." He held it up to the moonlight. "It meant love then. It means love now. Different love, but just as real." Hannah took the ring, studied it. The sapphire caught the light blue as a summer sky. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll marry you again, as many times as you want." Caleb slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Thank you," Hannah said, "for trusting me with something so precious." "You're something precious. The ring is just metal and stone." She kissed him, then long and deep, while the summer night wrapped around them like a blessing. The second wedding took place on a September morning. The whole town came, not out of obligation, out of genuine desire to celebrate something good. Hannah wore a dress Clara Bennett had helped her make. White cotton with blue ribbons to match the sapphire on her finger. Molly carried flowers. Jacob served as ring-bearer, looking terrified but determined. Reverend Grayson performed the ceremony. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we've gathered to witness what God has already blessed. The union of Caleb and Hannah Thornton." Caleb stood at the altar, scrubbed clean and uncomfortable in his Sunday suit. But when Hannah walked toward him, all the discomfort faded. She was beautiful. Not just her dress or her hair or the flowers in her hands. Beautiful in the way she moved, the way she smiled, the way she looked at him like he was the only person in the world. "Do you, Caleb, take Hannah to be your wife, to love and cherish in sickness and in health for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." "And do you, Hannah, take Caleb to be your husband, to love and cherish in sickness and in health for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again." Grayson smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb kissed Hannah, while the church erupted in cheers. Molly jumped up and down, clapping her hands. Jacob looked confused, but happy. Mary wept openly, joy and grief mingled on her face. Even Silas wiped his eyes, though he'd deny it later. They walked out of the church into brilliant sunshine. People pressed forward with congratulations, handshakes, hugs, well wishes, and at the edge of the crowd, a figure in black. Prudence Whitmore. Hannah saw her first. tensed. Caleb felt it followed her gaze. Prudence didn't approach, just stood there watching. Her face was different somehow. Softer, less sharp. Then she nodded once. A small gesture, almost invisible, and walked away. "What was that?" Hannah whispered. "I don't know." Caleb watched Prudence disappear down the road. Maybe goodbye, maybe sorry, maybe just acknowledgement that we all survived. Do you think she'll be okay? I hope so. Everyone deserves a chance to heal, even her. The celebration continued, food and music and dancing that lasted until the stars came out. But Hannah kept thinking about Prudence, about the woman who'd tried to destroy them, now standing alone at the edge of everything. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. Some people needed more time. Hannah hoped Prudence would find her peace. Eventually. Somehow. Everyone deserved that much. Fall came with colors and cooling air. The harvest was good. The ranch prospered. The gate stayed open and people kept coming through. One October morning, a wagon appeared on the road. Caleb saw it from the porch where he sat with Hannah drinking coffee, watching the children play. Someone's coming. They watched the wagon approach. A family this time. Man driving. Woman beside him. 3 children in the back, huddled together against the morning chill. The wagon stopped at the gate. The man climbed down, thin, exhausted, desperate around the eyes. A look Caleb knew well by now. "Heard you help people." The man's voice cracked. "We've got nothing left. Lost our farm. Been traveling for weeks. The children—" He couldn't finish. Caleb rose, walked to the gate. "What's your name?" Thomas Burke. This is my wife, Sarah. Our children." "You're welcome here, Thomas Burke." Caleb pushed the gate open. "All of you, as long as you need." The man's face crumpled. "Why, you don't know us. We can't pay. We've got nothing. You've got a family that needs help." "That's enough." Hannah appeared beside Caleb, smiling warmly. "Come inside. We've got food on the stove and beds that need filling. The children can play with ours." Sarah Burke started crying. Thomas gathered her in his arms, both of them shaking with relief. Their children piled out of the wagon, 2 boys and a girl, ages ranging from maybe 5 to 12. They stared at the ranch with wide, wondering eyes. Molly ran toward them, thunder in hand. "Hi, I'm Molly. Do you want to see my horse?" "He's not a real horse, but he's magic. And we have real horses too. Maple's my favorite. Come on." She grabbed the youngest Burke child by the hand and pulled her toward the barn, chattering the whole way. Jacob followed, determined not to be left out. The Burke boys looked at their parents, uncertain. "Go on," Thomas said roughly. "It's okay. You're safe now." They ran after Molly, their fear already beginning to fade. Thomas turned to Caleb. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me, just pass it on someday. That's how this works." They walked through the gate together, the Burke family broken and desperate and scared. Another family joining the chain. Another gate opening somewhere down the line. That evening, Caleb stood at the fence, watching the sun set over his land. Hannah joined him, slipping her hand into his. Busy day. Busy life. Any regrets? Caleb thought about it. About Martha, who he'd loved and lost. About the 4 years of grief that had nearly destroyed him. About the night Hannah appeared at his gate, changing everything. "Not one," he said. "You, not one." They stood together, watching colors bleed across the sky. Behind them, the ranch hummed with life, children laughing, adults talking. The sounds of a community being built, one person at a time. "Think we'll keep doing this?" Hannah asked. "Taking people in?" "Long as people need taking in." "That could be forever." "Then we'll do it forever." Hannah leaned against him. "I love you, Caleb Thornton." "I love you too, Hannah Thornton." The sun sank below the horizon. Stars emerged. The gate stood open behind them, a standing invitation to anyone who might need it. This was what they'd built. Not just a ranch. Not just a family. A promise. A promise that help would always be there. That kindness would always win. That no one who came to their gate would ever be turned away. Some promises were easy to make and hard to keep. This one was hard to make and harder to keep. But they would keep it anyway. Because that's what love did. It opened gates. It built bridges. It turned strangers into family and family into legacy. And somewhere years from now, when Caleb and Hannah were long gone, someone would tell the story. The story of a desperate widow who knocked on a rancher's door. The story of a man who said, "You're my guest," instead of, "You're my worker." The story of a community transformed by one act of kindness that spread and spread until it changed the world. They wouldn't know all the details. Names would blur. Facts would shift. But the heart of it would remain. Open the gate. Help who needs helping. Pass it on. That was the promise. That was the legacy. That was love, written in Wyoming dirt and spring rain, and children's laughter lasting forever in the hearts of everyone who heard the story and chose to live it. The gate stood open. It would never close. And that more than anything else was the point.